Hey everybody, Travels with Dottie here. And you just saw George the cat sneak off camera there. Dottie's off camera. Today I'm going to talk to you about um, the rules that are spoken and unspoken, doing boondocking in particular in Quartzsite. And I'm talking about the long-term visitor areas. I stay in La Posa South. And the first part of the video, I'm going to talk about sort of rules of etiquette that aren't necessarily written in the rule book. After I finish that, I'm going to read you the rules from the rule book so you know both. Why is it important to know both? I'll tell you this. The title of this was, How Can You Lose Your Permit? Well, some people mistakenly think that maybe I can lose my permit if I break one of their written rules. And that's true, you can. But let me read what it says here on permit revocation. Listen to this carefully. An authorized BLM officer may revoke without reimbursement your LTVA permit if you violate any BLM rule, which we suspected, or regulation, or here's the important part, your conduct or that of your family, guests, or pets is inconsistent with the goal of BLM LTVA program. Once they do this, you have like 12 hours to leave. You have to leave, and they will force you to leave, I'm sure. They have rangers that are law enforcement officers. But let's talk about violating the goals. What's the goal? Well, the first paragraph says, the goals of the Bureau of Land Management long-term visitor areas are to provide a safe and enjoyable public land camping experience for all visitors, while promoting environmental stewardship, mutual respect, and responsible use of America's natural resources. All that means together is there's a lot of reasons why they can revoke your permit, and none of them necessarily have to do with the written rules. A lot of them will have to do with what I'm about to talk to you about first, is the more through sort of experience that I know that these things are basic expectations of anyone using the land. And the first one is going to be respect nature and leave no trace. You've heard that phrase before, pack it in, pack it out. You don't leave anything behind, right? Um, the other thing is minimize driving off these roads. Now, there are a lot of roads and washes that in on this land that look pretty well traveled, and I would suggest you kind of stay to that and not drive off haphazardly. Um, Minimize fire impact. If campfires are allowed, which they are, use it, create a fire ring, keep it away from vegetation, things like that. Then there's respecting wildlife. Don't feed wild animals. Don't feed the coyotes, and keep a safe distance even from the small animals. Just keep your distance from animals. Being mindful of noise. This is a big one. Um, Keep your generators quiet, right? As quiet as you can. Now, open frame construction generators aren't prohibited, but they're really loud. And it would be mindful of you to minimize their use versus if you had a nice quiet Honda generator. There are quiet hours. It's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. are where you can run a generator. You can run it the full time if you want. But just be aware of your surroundings, how close. If you're going to run your generator a lot, it's maybe a good idea to get as far away from people, especially people you don't know, as you can, so not to disturb them. So even though generators are allowed, if you use them in a manner that violates the general purpose, in the goals, they can say that your use of the generator violates that, and you need to stop using it. And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to stand up for my rights, and think that you have a right to use a generator. And I'm not so sure that's absolutely true, because if it's in violation of the goals of the organization, they have every right to make a decision that we're going to ask you to leave, we're going to revoke your permit. So be really careful about that. Loud music, right? Loud music, there isn't really a rule other than about specific instances of amplified music. And when we talk about the LTVA actual rules, I'll read that rule. But loud music is almost always a bad idea, that if you're going to disturb other people. Respecting personal space of other campers, especially campers that you're not associated with. If you're camping with people and you want to camp really close to the people that you know and you're all in agreement, that's fine. But driving up and dropping a camp right next to someone you don't know, while the rule is, we're going to find out later, the rule is 15 feet. But etiquette says there's lots of room. There's thousands of acres out there. There's no reason for you to park 15 feet within 15 feet exactly of someone that you don't know. It's invasive. It's not okay. It's within the technical rules, but is it the right thing to do? I'd say probably not. Um, and be considerate of shared resources, like water spigots and dump stations and things like that. We're all welcome to use them if we have a permit. But like hanging out in front of the spigot or the dump station, talking to a guy, hanging out, and leaving someone behind you waiting for a long time because you're chit-chatting, it's not okay. Disposing of waste properly. You should never dump. Hang on a second. There we go. You should never dump gray or black water on the ground. That's what the dump stations are for. Even if it seems like you have some rationalization where there's nothing in my gray water but water, I don't even use soap, it's just plain water, I should be able to dump it in the desert. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's why we have dump stations there. And there's specific rules on that we'll get to. Limit light pollution. This is something that isn't in the rule book and people don't think about. Turn off unnecessary outdoor lighting to allow others to enjoy stargazing in the environment at night. It's polite. It's nice to do. There's no reason. I have like a motion sensor light. If someone gets really close to my rig, the light will come on, but I don't keep LED lights on the outside of my rig all night. I allow people around to have the sense of peace and darkness at night. They can look up at the stars. It's polite to do that. Let's see. Be prepared. Everyone needs to be prepared for an emergency. That means where you camp, find out your GPS coordinates and have instant access to them. If you or someone near you needs emergency services, you're not going to be able to describe where you are in the LTVA. It's too big and it's too complicated. But if you can send GPS coordinates to 911, they'll know exactly where to come. So be prepared for that. Pets. Pets are a big deal. You should keep them on a leash. You shouldn't be letting them run wild. And there's actually a leash rule in the LTVA. But in general, when you're camping around other people, especially people you don't know, letting your animals run wild is not okay. They need to be on a leash and they need to be controlled for the safety of your pet and the safety of other people around and other pets, right? Let's see. I have notes here that I made, and that's pretty much it for the sort of the etiquette things. Now we're going to talk about the actual LTVA um, rules, and I need to. I'm going to read from this, so I'm going to make it big so my almost 65-year-old eyes um, to see that. And some of them I'm going to read word for one. Some of them I'm going to just paraphrase. And the first one I'm going to do that. Permit requirement this year, it's $180, and you can stay there in one spot without moving from September 15th to April 15th. $180 buys that permit. And for $40, you can stay for 2 weeks. And you want to stay for a month, you can buy back-to-back ones. When you reach a month in a month and a week, you're up to if you go 6 weeks, you're going to exceed you're going to be at $200. So you might as well have bought the $181 thing. Displaying the permit, they will help you if you buy the permit where you pull up to the little office that's out front. You buy the permit there. At least in every case that I've had, they've come out and they put the permit in the proper place so the camp host and rangers know where to look for it. So there's one on your vehicle, there's one on your rig if they're two separate things like mine. So that permit needs to be displayed at all times when you're in there. Permit transfers, there's no such thing. You can't like transfer your permit to someone else. The permit is just for you and the vehicles that you've registered with that permit. And permit revocation, I've read that. You must, if you get it revoked, and you probably think, oh, this is never going to happen to me. It's other people. They'll never revoke my permit. I imagine when this happens is that it's an individual that really in their heart believes they're within their rights and they're standing up to the authority, to the government representative, and establishing their rights and being aggressive about it. I don't think they're going to put up with that very much. And as I've shown you, it doesn't have to be a violation of one of these rules. It can be anything that they deem to interfere with the goals of the organization. And that's pretty darn subjective. And guess who the Rangers are going to side with? The authorized representative or you? Probably the authorized representative. So unoccupied camping sites, there's a rule that you cannot leave your campsite unattended for more than 5 days without seeking permission. So if you're going to be gone for more than 5 days, it's really a good idea to go to that office and say, hey, I got to leave for 10 days. This is where I'm camped. Is it okay to do that? And get permission. So that's a really good idea. Parking, this is where the rule is. For your safety and privacy, you must maintain a minimum of 15 space between dwelling units. Now, and like I said, that's not permission to get a tape measure out and measure 15 feet from someone you don't know and park right on that line and think there's no consequences for that. If you're disturbing that person by being that close and they complain, I think it's reasonable for the camp host to come out and say, hey, this person is uncomfortable. Can you move your rig, 20 feet that way? And you start refusing because you're, quote, within your rights. I think that may be a good way to lose your permit. Noise. Do not operate audio devices or motorized equipment, including generators, in a manner that makes unreasonable noise as determined by the authorized BLM officer. Think about that. People think, I have a right to run my generator because it's not during quiet hours. Well, you don't. You don't have the right to run any generator making any amount of noise, because this says very clearly that the authorized BLM officer can decide what's reasonable and unreasonable. And if they say your open frame generator is making too much noise, you can't use it, and you stand up for your rights to do it and argue with them, you could lose your permit. Outdoor amplified music is allowed only within La Posa and Imperial Dam LTVAs in locations designated by the BLM and when approved in advance by the authorized BLM officer. So understand that you don't have the right, even though it's not quiet hours, to blast outdoor speakers. Remember that. Access: do not block trails or trails in public use with your parked vehicles, stones, wooden barricades, or by any other means. So, when you set up your camp, you can't restrict people's ability to move around the land around you. Structures in landscaping: a fixed fence, dog runs, storage units, windbreaks, and other such structures are prohibited. Temporary structures of these types must conform to posted policies. Do not alter the natural landscape by painting rocks, as well as defacing or damaging any natural or archaeological feature. So this can be a little confusing. Don't confuse those like flimsy little fences that people put up outside their rig to keep their dog in. That's not a dog run. They're talking about more permanent kinds of structures or sheds. I think there's an obvious difference. But if a park ranger or a camp host comes up and says what you've got here doesn't meet guidelines, I would suggest you accommodate them or ask politely if there's any appeal process to the decision. And if there is, follow that process, but be polite. Livestock, horses, cattle, sheep, you can't have them. You can't have them. Pets must be kept on a leash at all times. Keep an eye on your pets. Unattended and unwatched pets may fall prey to coyotes or other desert predators. And you are responsible for cleaning up and sanitary disposal of your pet's waste. And a lot of people think, well, all the animals out here, the coyotes, nobody picks up after them. A coyote's kind of a dog and they're pooping everywhere. So why shouldn't I allow my dog to poop just like a wild animal? Because coyotes live there. It's their home. Your dog is a guest. And there's a rule that says you must pick up their waste. And any other argument doesn't really make a lot of sense to make. And here's the thing that I've been guilty of. Inadvertently, we all carry these plastic bags we put the poop in. And, what do you do with it when you're walking? So sometimes I've gotten careless and I've discovered that I've accidentally dropped that plastic bag. And this is what I think occurs. People get really angry when they go out. They say, oh, I saw a poop bag with poop in it out there. How can people be so rude? And just they go off on whoever did that. And my explanation is always, it's probably inadvertent. No one packages up pet waste and then throws it on the ground deliberately. What happens is they've been a little careless and they accidentally dropped it, like I have in the past. So try not to do that. And this kind of goes without saying, don't disturb any archaeological or historic values, including petroglyphs, ruins, historic buildings. Just don't mess with any kind of structure or anything historic or interesting looking. Just don't mess with it. And for God's sake, don't mess with the cactus. There's some, those big classic looking cacti that are out there. There's state laws covering those, and that you can get major fines by messing with or damaging those. Don't mess with the cactus. In dumping, it says absolutely there's no ambiguity here on gray water. No dumping of gray water. No, and obviously no black water. And any trash goes straight into designated areas. Let's see, is there anything else that's not obvious? Okay. Self-contained camping units. This is kind of an interesting one. Self-contained camping units must have a fixed wastewater holding tank a 10-gallon capacity. BLM does not consider porta potty systems that utilize portable holding tanks or permanent holding tanks of less than 10 gallons to be self-contained. And in the LTVA, if you don't meet this, you can camp there, but you must be within 500 feet of one of the vault toilets. And how can they tell this? They can tell by looking at your rig. Is there evidence of a dump valve for black water? If there isn't, they're going to call you in violation. Now, are they going to measure your tank to make sure it's not 9 instead of 10? No, they can't do that. They're going to assume if if it's not, you can't get away with attaching a valve to the bottom of a Prius. They're going to know there's no 10-gallon tank there. But if you have an RV and they can see that, they won't bother you. But they're serious about that. I've seen them, give warnings to people and tell them they have to move. Campfires comply with all posted rules. They're don't do it near vegetation. Wood collection. This is something a lot of people don't know. You cannot collect, keep, or possess any wood found in the desert. Let me read this for you so it's clear. Do not collect wood within LTVAs. You may not possess native firewood, i.e. mesquite, ironwood, palo verde, within LTVAs. Please contact the nearest BLM office for current regulations concerning wood collection. That's surprising. I'm talking even dead stuff on the ground. Not only can't you possess it, but you certainly can't burn it in a campfire, which is why people go to town and they buy firewood, because you cannot use that wood in the LTVA, and they're serious about that. Speed limit, 15 miles per hour. There's a little tolerance for people like blasting through the fast. And here's the other thing. 15 miles per hour is not always appropriate. When I'm traveling, the main road, most of it's asphalt, but when you get off onto these little side trips and you're on the desert and it's windy or dry or both, or it doesn't mean windy is, forget I said windy. If it's dry, look and see how much dust your vehicle is kicking up. And if it's kicking up a lot of dust and you're going by someone's camp, for heaven's sake, slow down to a speed where you're not kicking dust. Who wants to be sitting outside their rig enjoying the day and somebody goes by fast and I get engulfed by a cloud of desert dust and sand? No one wants that. So that's not a rule here, but you may have to go 2 or 3 or 4 miles an hour. I drive through, and if I'm kicking up dust and I come up to someone's camp, I'll slow down to just a couple of miles an hour, go through there, wave to them, especially if someone's sitting outside. Go slow enough so I'm not doing that, and then I'll resume speed if I'm out in the open. Firearms. Do not discharge or otherwise use firearms or weapons inside or within 1/2 mile of an LTVA. You can't target practice. You can't shoot a weapon. You can have weapons. You just can't shoot them. Vending permits. Any commercial thing. I've seen people try to set up little businesses out there. If you don't have a permit, they will shut you down. And if you don't shut down, they may actually revoke your permit and ask you to leave. They certainly can do that. And I think they certainly would if they give you a warning and you continue to try to sell things. Let's see. A lot of these are other LTVAs, so I'm not going to read them. Imperial Dam in La Posa. Do not camp overnight in desert washes in Imperial Dam and all the La Posa LTVAs in Quartzsite. Why? Because it's dangerous. It looks dry and safe, and flash floods can happen without warning. And it doesn't need to be raining there for a flash flood. It could be raining in the mountains, and suddenly there's a flash flood and you're dead. So don't ever, ever camp in a wash. Let's see. Well, You must keep the LTVA and specifically your campsite in a neat, orderly, and sanitary condition. Neat and orderly is pretty subjective, and guess who gets to make that decision? The BLM rep gets to make that decision, not you, not us. So just a reminder, the penalties, if you knowingly and willfully violate or fail to comply with any of the rules provided in this notice, BLM may revoke your LTVA permit. You may also be subject to the issue of a citation and or arrest with a fine or imprisonment under the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. So this stuff is serious. So enjoy the desert like I do every year. Just keep in mind there are written rules, and then there's rules of etiquette and reasonability, which also could apply. Don't let you be one of the ones that naively tries to stand up for your rights and you lose your privilege, you lose your permit, and you can't stay out there. I hope this has helped you guys understand how things work, boondocking, and how to be kind and polite to your neighbors and how to keep yourself out of trouble. Take care. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next video.